Earlier this week, I talked about the problems with decluttering, kind of all of the ways that decluttering is problematic, most especially in the context of the YouTuber who performs the declutter. And so in that video, I mentioned that there was going to be a part two because I didn't just want to say this thing's a problem and then provide no answers, alternatives, or solutions. In this video, this is exactly what we're going to be talking about. There are better ways to declutter, and there are ways that we can do it more consciously to become more conscious consumers. So let's get into it. The first thing I think we should consider is our mindset and relatedly goals. A lot of why we declutter and how we declutter comes back to our habits and how we think about our stuff. One example of this is viewing decluttering as synonymous with donating, and then also seeing donating stuff as the first and sometimes the only step when it comes to decluttering. One of the things we can do is to reframe donating not as the first step, but as the last step. Can you recycle or upcycle something that you already have? There are lots of ways that we can reuse stuff and repurpose stuff. And sometimes the answer might not come to us immediately, but if we, put that thing to the side, we might be able to come up with some ideas or learn some new things that can, get those creative juices flowing. So just one example that's not clothing is makeup supplies. So I had a bunch of makeup and makeup brushes that I didn't want to use anymore, and they were not good enough to pass on to other people. So I transitioned them to art supplies. Some of my favorite art brushes are actually old makeup brushes. I have used highlighter and facial glitter in art, as well as blushes. I've used blushes with art, and I do know that, or I have learned recently, that there are some folks who mix eyeshadow with nail polish. They do fun stuff with their eyeshadow to turn it into nail polish. And a really basic one as well when it does come to clothing that we don't need any skill for would be to turn unwanted, end of life, mainly t-shirts and sweaters, into rags for car maintenance or mechanical electronic maintenance, perhaps even maintenance for around the home. A lot of the fibers for clothing are actually really great for picking up dust. I know when I'm doing some dusting, there's some areas the window where there's dirt and dust, and I only have 3 reusable microfiber cloths that I don't really want to put by the window. So I'll use old t-shirts and stuff for that. Also, I think the way that we consider what end of life means could use some reframing. A belt loop being busted or even small holes in fabrics doesn't inherently make something end of life. We can repair a lot of things, and quite frankly, many of us just don't possess those skills. So instead of learning the skills, we just toss this stuff. And I do think that something like sewing on a belt loop doesn't actually take a lot of skill. You could watch a 5-minute YouTube video. Kind of the same thing with it's a needle and thread that you don't need a sewing machine either. Same thing with buttons on shirts. And a lot of stuff can just take some mending, gluing your makeup brushes back together, filling in a hole on a dresser. There's lots of things that we can do that are within our power to extend the life of our garments or our stuff. And I think a lot of us, we come to perhaps enjoy when something breaks or doesn't serve us anymore. We see it as broken or end of life because it means that we get to buy something new and replace it. That's of course not true 100% of the time. I think that can sometimes play into our lack of desire or interest in learning some skills. And we don't have to learn everything at once. Learning some very, very basic mending skills can help us maintain the life of our pants and our shirts. Also, kind of things like stains. Not every stain is removable, but over the past year, I have learned a lot about stains, kind of how to get some of that out. I personally want to learn more extended sewing skills because I would like to be able to do at the very least some basic alterations like hemming pants. I had t-shirt gate last month where a lot of my t-shirts started smelling bad. And I was thinking, well, if I can't fix these, I could turn some of these into tank tops, but I need the sewing skills to turn some of these things into tank tops. I don't want to be like a master sewist. I want some basic sewing skills and some basic mending skills to extend the life of our clothing. And this is a skill that a lot of people just don't have anymore. And it's a skill that I think intimidates a lot of people, not just in like time, but also I think that there's perhaps this association of like sewing as a craft and an art opposed to like a basic life skill. So many of us have taught ourselves to cook or to clean or like basic home maintenance. And I see sewing as like an extension of that. Still in a bit of the mindset and way we think about clothes category is getting used to or learning new ways to appreciate our clothes when they're past their prime. So many of us are used to owning things for just a couple of years or discarding clothes after 7 or 10 uses. The average garment is discarded after 7 to 10 uses. That's the average. And this is a mindset shift, in my opinion, because if we're used to doing something a certain way, like we're used to owning a certain amount of clothes for a certain amount of time, wearing things for a certain amount of time, we kind of develop this habit, and we also get this feeling of this isn't new anymore, or like it's past its prime, it's not exciting anymore. We get bored of our clothes. The concepts of like repurposing and restyling can apply to entire garments. How do I make this thing that's not new and exciting anymore wearable or newer and more exciting? This doesn't just apply to clothes. This can apply to any kind of area of our life that we might have, including like interior design, other hobby supplies or makeup, sports and sports equipment, books, reading, all of that stuff. I really want to emphasize boredom and contentment because contentment is a skill. Learning to appreciate what we have and appreciating our stuff once it's not new and shiny anymore, once it's past its prime, is a real skill and a habit that is going to take intention to cultivate. And if you're somebody who's used to over-consuming or who's used to impulse purchasing, kind of indulging those whims, then you're out of practice with contentment because quite often we find ourselves wanting to declutter stuff and wanting to get rid of stuff because we're bored, because it's not in its prime anymore. And the primary way that we appreciate our stuff is when it's new. I have lots of videos on this channel about how to cultivate contentment and how to do that in different areas of your lives. So if you want to, watch more on that, I'll link some videos below. Some things truly are at the end of their lives and they're not usable or wearable in any kind of capacity. But I really do think that our habits, as well as our desire to buy new things and our concepts of boredom, have really warped our sense of end of life and when something is not good enough anymore. When it is time to get rid of something, I think what can become like maybe the best course of action, or is like the primary step, or like one of the steps to consider doing first, is to hand an item off to somebody directly. There are certain things that I wouldn't cut up or transform in some way because they're truly better left together. And so selling items on Depop, Poshmark, or Vinted can be a great option. Clothing swaps or bringing them to like a consignment store, those can be like first options. Handing something off directly to another human is a way to like take ownership of something at the end of its life. And when it comes to non-clothing items, there are lots of options that like aren't a thrift store. Schools and libraries for some books and art supplies, daycares even, just, depending on the items. I have donated books to schools and libraries. And when it comes to consumables, whether that's makeup or art supplies or others, I think mindset shifts have to happen here as well about things like backups as well as enoughness. Taking ownership of your stuff and using it up to completion is a really wonderful thing to do. Now, if you're somebody who has a lot of stuff, like I know people who have 50 foundations. 50 foundations are not usable in your lifetime before they expire. They're just not. You could probably keep those foundations for 2 to 4 years, depending on the type of foundation they are and how strict you are adhering to like expiration dates. So 4 times 4 would be 16. So you might want to keep 16 to 20 of the foundations, right? You can take ownership of them. I'm going to do my absolute best to finish up all of this stuff. And then for the rest of the stuff that's not expired, that you won't be able to finish, handing those things off to real life people where possible. This is also true with things like washi tape or perfumes, skincare products, and a lot of things can be repurposed. Like if a moisturizer isn't working on your face, maybe it works on your body or your hands. And we need to get into the practice of thinking about those alternative uses and taking ownership to finish up our stuff where we can. I think project pans are really wonderful, even if it's not for makeup. I think it's wonderful for most people to do at least once, is because you are actively taking ownership over using a set of products. It was this experience that helped me to cut back on makeup and skincare. It also played a role in helping me think critically about my makeup consumption and my skincare consumption. I had so many skincare products and so many backups. I was a big fan of the backup, and that's something I generally don't do anymore. And if using your stuff up to completion isn't a habit that you already have, like if the main way you get rid of stuff is by decluttering, I think trying your hand at a project pan in a category is just like a wonderful way to kind of kickstart a habit. Over the past 2 to 3 years in specific, I've also decided, I don't think I've ever really talked about it, but I decided that my goal, or the goal that I want to work up to, is to eventually like not declutter anything. In some ways, this goal might be impossible because even if you make purchases with the best of intentions, sometimes things don't work out. But if you have it as a goal of, I'm not going to declutter anymore, or I would like to get to that point, it helps you think about things a little bit differently when you're in the buying process. As a kind of extra to this goal, or like an add-on to this goal, I've also decided that I don't want to bring any clothes to the thrift store. I'm okay donating some home furnishing items because those tend to make it to onto the floor, but clothes, there's a much smaller chance. This has meant that I have done my absolute best to give unwanted items new homes. I've spent more time and energy than ever before rehoming clothes, like physically, handing clothes off to somebody, whether that's through Depop or Poshmark, selling clothes, or through bringing items to clothing swaps. A key component to changing unwanted habits is to make the unwanted habit as difficult to do as possible. And because I've made discarding my stuff as difficult to do as possible, I don't do it all that much anymore. It's greatly impacted my desire to declutter because I've made decluttering like a challenging thing to do. And so it's also kind of had that trickle-on effect of framing what I'm thinking about before I buy it. Could I use this to its threads, or, the last dregs? Could I repurpose this? Could I, see myself wanting to wear this 5 years down the road? When it comes to the act of decluttering, the best thing that we can do, especially if we are out of practice in doing this, is to learn about why things aren't working for us and why we have a desire to discard a piece in the first place. Pushing as deep as you can with that answer, because something not working anymore, or not liking something, or not wearing something anymore, that's a pretty surface level reason. The best way to make better choices in the future is to learn about ourselves, learn about our preferences, our choices, our habits, and our thought processes. So here's something that you can do. Let's say you have a handful of stuff that you don't want anymore. You can split your unwanted clothing items into a couple of piles. And I think the two most beneficial would be things that you don't like anymore and things that you don't wear anymore. There could be some crossover, but just kind of pick the pile that resonates with you. And then maybe you could have like a third pile of like stuff that is imperfect. This could be like stuff that has like maybe tears, holes, flaws, things like that. That one could be like the to mend pile. Here's stuff that needs to be like repurposed in some way. Like that right now is imperfect and like you could wear it if there was a button or the tear was replaced. Kind of more obvious things. So now you have these two piles. Take some items from there and do like case studies on them. All right, why am I not wearing this item? Like, let's probe as deep as we can. So I'll give you a personal example from one of these exercises that I did a couple weeks ago. I had this black mock neck long sleeve top. I wasn't wearing it and it wasn't like immediately obvious to me why. So we did like a quick little, 3 to 5 minute little noodle session over it. And here's what I learned. It's too thin to be worn on its own. It's a mock neck and it's black. Therefore, it's a fall winter piece. So if I actually want to wear it in the winter, it has to be layered under or over something, most likely under something. So if I layer it under something, it's going to be like a sweater like this, or perhaps like a cardigan. And I don't have very many pieces that I would layer this under in and then also be comfortable to see a mock neck. I also don't typically like layering long sleeves under other long sleeves. There are exceptions, but that's typically not like a norm for me. I generally don't like turtlenecks or mock necks. I don't like things touching my neck. Again, exceptions to the rule, but it's something that I should establish as a rule. Like as a rule, I don't buy mock necks or turtlenecks. And then number 3, it has like bat wing sleeves. And I do not like my underarms like touching each other because it's like uncomfortable and I sweat. Also, I don't like wearing tank tops a lot. And actually, to build on that, I prefer tank tops over long sleeves where your underarms touch each other because when you have a tank top, there's at least circulation there. But when you have long sleeves, there is no circulation because it's just all closed off. So then you sweat more and then it's just uncomfortable. All of these are very actionable things that I can take with me to future purchases. Will no longer buy batwing sleeves. I will no longer buy mock neck tops. And also when it comes to like the thin sweater, largely a useless item in my closet. And when I do have them, they should be in light colors. That's kind of something else that I was learning in a different item. But long sleeve, lightweight tops, not it for fall or winter. This is not how people typically declutter. They'll typically put things into like yes or no, or yes, no, unsure. What I do actually think might be a helpful pile is like a 2 style pile, clothing that you feel like is limiting to you or that you don't know how to style. This could also be with other hobby supplies and art supplies, would depend on, or even beauty items. Something like you don't know how to wear or use, like you only use it one way. Let's say you have a blue washi tape. You don't use the blue washi tape because you're not really sure how it would work in your journal or your spread. Maybe you just have like a free crafting afternoon where you don't put it in your journal and you use it on a blank page and you see and you come up with new ways to use that item. You could do that with so many things. And sometimes we're just limited in our head about how we do things. We just need a little inspiration and a little push every now and then. And then we figure out how to style something and maybe we go, wow, that thing is awesome. And we've now found ways to use it. Or sometimes when we style something, we realize how much it actually doesn't work for us. And then we can learn from that. And so when it comes to why we're decluttering, we need to get better at assessing why. Why aren't we liking something or wearing something? And to declutter more responsibly, in my opinion, we should be focusing more on learning about what's working, what's not, and how we can use that information to inform future purchases. This is just not really part and parcel of how a lot of people declutter, and it's something that I think is really missing. You could create a journal spread. You could create a Notion database. You could have like a capsule wardrobe book or like a little notebook, Or if not a capsule wardrobe one, you could just have like a decluttering notebook where you write all of your thoughts, observations, and reflections of all categories that you've decluttered. I've created a little Notion database of clothing declutters that I've done seasonally so I can actually use that information to put it somewhere to then take action, because it's also kind of useless to make notations about or like go through these motions of thinking about our clothes or our stuff. Why isn't it working? To then do nothing with it. It's equivalent to doing nothing if we don't find ways to put this knowledge into action. Lastly, what I think everybody should have is like a small little quarantine bin. I have a drawer. It's not a full drawer, it's like half a drawer. And also some stuff under the couch. Stuff that I thought that I might want to declutter. Here's the thing about the quarantine bin. A lot of the girlies want to say, get the stuff out of your house as soon as possible. Don't let it take up space. Sure, I get that. But some of the reasons why you want to declutter stuff are boredom. Like that's a lot of it is boredom and discontentment. When you put stuff away under your bed or anywhere, really, when you put it away for 6 or 12 months and then you revisit it with fresh eyes, sometimes it's a little bit more exciting. Almost in any seasonal declutter. I don't think I've had a seasonal declutter where I haven't pulled back something from a quarantine bin and I'm more excited about it. But also there's stuff in there like I've put in and I just don't know why I'm not wearing it or I don't like it. Like I just don't have a legitimate reason and I don't understand. I'll keep it in the quarantine bin, and sometimes over time, as I've had more space and time with my style, I'll become really clear. One of the clearest examples of this to me, I had this, or I still have it. It's a J. Crew sweater. It says brown camel color, not this color, but it's more like this. And I loved the sweater when I first bought it, but I never really wore it, and it sat around in that box for 2 years because I couldn't understand why. Like I looked at that sweater and I would still objectively think it's a nice sweater. And then I'd put it on and be like, this sucks. Why don't what is wrong with this? Turns out the neckline of the sweater is too wide and the sweater is oversized. Both of those things come together. And I also think the color is a little bit wrong for me, but that's not the main reason. The neckline. I have learned through the process of another sweater about like boat neck necklines and like what I consider what kind of neckline is too big. And this sweater has a neckline that's too big and I can't deal with it. I can't deal with it. So I have come this past spring to like really learn about necklines. And now like I have concrete information. I know why I don't like it. And it might be mendable. I'm not sure. But now I have like concrete information to take with me in the future. Now let's end with the other side of the coin, the buying side of the coin. If we're able to change how we buy stuff, we can have a really big impact on like our decluttering lives. However, if we never learn contentment or, facing our boredom, like we're still going to experience those things even if we buy less. So buying differently is going to be important, but it's not going to be the end all be all. It's in this buying that like the lessons and the knowledge we can gain from our decluttering, that's how we put them into practice. That's how we start buying differently and buying better. And also like wanting to buy different and wanting to buy things that we can keep for longer or buy things that we just simply enjoy more. One thing that people also tend to forget is that our aesthetic preferences change in just about every category, from home to beauty and fashion. Things don't last as long as we might think that they are. Even like personal preferences for makeup colors or textures and formulas. What happens a lot is that we like something and we get excited about it. Like maybe we like ruffle sweaters, or maybe we like warm tone lipsticks or warm tone eyeshadows, or we really like powder blushes. Perhaps we're really into chevron, or we really like square toe flats. we buy multiples of these things. We buy lots of stuff in Chevron, different colors of square toe shoes because we don't just like the flats, we like the square toe look. Or we buy multiple shades of cream blushes in different formulas. Those preferences, they're not around forever. So in a year, 2 years, 3 years, we don't like that thing anymore, but we've bought that aesthetic thing or that trend or that preference in excess. So we not only have one thing that we don't like, but we have 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 50 things that we don't like because we bought lots of that thing in that color or that texture or that formula. I actually see this a lot in makeup declutters where somebody will get into something like lip gloss. They've never been into lip gloss before, and then time will move on and they'll get into something else or their preferences will change, and then they'll declutter all of the lip glosses that they never used. I see this a lot with like blush formulas and textures, lipstick colors and formulas. All the girlies declutter their matte lipsticks, like it happens to the best of us. So I think keeping that in mind before we buy can be really important. You like something? Cool. What is enough? Can we participate in a trend or a preference without having to buy 50 of that thing? And sometimes we can like dupe the vibes with stuff that we already have. We see that a lot in fashion and not so much in other categories, but we totally can. We totally can. One thing to keep in mind about habits, and this is what we'll end on, is that habits change how we think. Habits actually impede the critical thinking process. And so how we shop, those are habits, and habits are really difficult to notice at first. It's one of the reasons why changing negative habits is so difficult. And so if you have shopping habits that you don't really like, one of the best things that you can do to change them is to start noticing them. Easier said than done, but you can start noticing them after the fact, and then like adding in buffers between the shopping and the buying in order to do more of that noticing. I have a video that talks about buffers that I can link as well. And adding in buffers, adding in more time between the adding to cart and the purchasing helps us to think more critically about what we're buying, or gives the opportunity to kind of put critical thinking in there. As I just mentioned, that habits impede or disrupt our critical thinking. And so that's why a lot of us don't do it. It's not that we're not incapable of doing it or that like we're stupid or we're dumb. We have habits that aren't, that don't facilitate that. So that's everything for me today. I hope you enjoyed this video. And I really hope that this was more of like a positive take about reframing how we think about decluttering and our stuff and our life. And I hope that you've come out of this video with an idea or two about things that you can implement in your life. Now, if I could leave you with one message in this video, it would be that to become a more conscious consumer, you just have to start. It doesn't have to be this overwhelming be-all end-all thing where like if you're not doing it perfectly, then you're doing it wrong. You gotta do something in order to learn and iterate. I'm a big believer of that. And so I encourage you to like take a step to try some stuff and to learn and iterate. If you enjoyed today's video, I would love for you to stick around for more of Everyday May, where I am producing 5 videos a week for the month of May. Thanks for watching, hanging out. I hope to see you again around here soon.